Welcome back, everyone, to another one-on-one with Jerry Hall. Today's conversation is with health, fitness, and nutrition enthusiast, Mr. P.D.Mangan. Now, you'll know him as P.D.Mangan on Twitter. I'm going to put a link to both his website and his Twitter in the description of this video. Now, this video, we're not going to talk a whole lot about cryptocurrencies. We're going to talk about the context in which, hey, your assets have completely made you wealthy. Are you healthy enough to enjoy your riches? Health and fitness is at the center of any longevity plan. If you've got the wealth to live a long, happy life, why not include mental and physical well-being in that mix? It's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. It's coming at you right now. Okay. Dennis, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. How are things going where you are?
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Things are going very well here. Nice day. Got out of the terrible summer weather that we have here, where you don't want to go outside, and so things are a lot better now.
Well, what part of the country are you in?
I'm in Central California, and it gets very hot here in the summer. So we've just gotten over about 3 months of that.
Well, that and you have the fires going on.
Absolutely. Air quality has been very poor around here, and that's gone now too. I mean, fortunately, we haven't had any fires nearby, but of course, it all just drifts into the atmosphere, and so yeah, that's mostly gone now.
Right on. Well, good to hear. I'll tell you, I've been following your Twitter account for quite some time, and one of the things I've always very much enjoyed is that you are kind of using that account to put out the message that, hey folks, of all the things we have, the truth is our number one and most important asset is our health. Now, my audience is primarily an investment-driven cryptocurrency type audience. But I think that is very true in this space, as it would be in any space, that let's say the hopes and dreams are fulfilled, right? These valuations and these markets go to a place where many of us will be able to enjoy life with a financial security like we've never had before. But as we get older, if we're not healthy, how are we going to enjoy it? So why don't you share with us what's been driving you to be a voice for that rallying cry?
Okay, interesting. Yes, I mean, as far as what you're talking about from an investment point of view and crypto investors, and like I mentioned to you before we started recording, that people have high hopes for Bitcoin and for other assets, and you're going to have to be around to enjoy them. I'm 65 years old myself, and so I'm very well aware of the future of old age is looking straight at me, and so I'm very aware of that. I want to keep my health, and it's perfectly possible to do so. Although you've got to take what the health establishment says with a barrel of salt if you want to do that. As far as how I got here, I went through a period of ill health myself that doctors couldn't figure out. That I went to a lot of them, and it was getting pretty bad. I was, at one point, I was just resigned that I was going to be ill the rest of my life. And then at some point, I decided that I had to, if I were ever going to get better, I would have to try to figure it out myself. And I have a background in microbiology and biochemistry, so I'm not, unfamiliar with scientific literature. And so I set about looking for answers, and I found some and put them into practice and got better. And so, this has already been quite a while, 10, 12 years since I got better. At the time when I was researching researching for answers to my problem, I thought, if I ever figure this out, I'm going to have to write a book about it. And then I was better after a while. And then I thought, oh yeah, I remember, well, I guess maybe I should write a book about it. So I did. And then when that was done, I thought, well, what do I do now? Well, might as well just keep going. I've got so much that I can say in this area of health and fitness. So I just kept going and wrote quite a few more books, have a website. I'm very active on Twitter now, as you know. So that's how I got to be doing what I'm doing, spreading this message that I'm hopefully spreading. That's what it's all about. That's what my Twitter account's all about. That's what my writing is all about.
No, I love it. I'll tell you, before, I guess it had to be back around 2007, 2006, right in that time frame, that I began a course of study. And I've always been kind of an avid learner. I've always enjoyed learning things. Well, it all started with, I saw a documentary called Super Size Me. And although instinctually, intuitively, whatever you want to call it, I knew that processed food and sugar and things of this nature do not produce good results. It was through watching that documentary and seeing the actual metabolic effects as it was being described through these scientific processes, blood pressure measurements, the insulin disbursements, the taxation on the pancreas, these things that they were able to look at just after 30 days of living on McDonald's, and extrapolating that out and thinking to myself, you know what? I'm one of these people that I engage in that behavior all the time. As a matter of fact, so much of it was unconscious. Just, hey, it's quick, it's easy. Hey, I've got 500,000 things to do today. Okay, I'll do a drive-through.
Right.
I'll do this, I'll do that. And so that started a course of study that led me to, all kinds of stuff. Looking at the Chinese history, going back into the Chinese pharmacopoeia, and looking at their 5,000 years of research and the effects of organic compounds in the body, whether they be through teas or tinctures or this or that. And the way they kind of had a holistic view of things. So you're not just a machine that you add fuel into, you're a holistic thing. So you've got compounds in, compounds out. You have energy, you have movement. It's, so it's not just nutrition, it's this, it's that. And I found that very interesting, some of which I've adopted and some of which, I'll be honest, I still struggle with. I have issues, addiction issues and things of that nature. And there are times where the wiring up here goes against the knowledge that I have. And that's just the truth. I'm not going to try to deny that, although it's not something I'm proud of. And one of the things I love about your Twitter account is that you're always bringing up these wonderful little things about, for one, I remember this was a month or two ago. I don't remember exactly what you said, but the context was basically yesterday doesn't matter. Today is what counts. Let's move forward. And I just thought, you know what, what a wonderful message that is. So many of us, we find things later in life, and some of us get filled with regret, and some of us go, oh, there's not a lot I can do about the past, but I can do something about today. I can do something about what's 5 minutes in front of me or 10 minutes in front of me. Could you expand upon some of these, like, I don't want to say nurturing approaches that you have, but it borders on, it's a very almost loving way that you disperse information. It's like you're very non-judgmental. You're just kind of like, hey, these are the things I'm finding. You may find benefit in them too. Where did that come from?
Yeah, that's interesting. I do I do try to be not, I guess, non-judgmental, as you would, as you put it. I think where that comes from is when I first started doing this, what I'm doing now with my writing and speaking as in things like this, I thought, well, why should anybody believe me? I don't have, I mean, I do have professional qualifications, but they're not really in this. It's only indirectly related to, what I'm doing now. So I tend to, a lot of things I tweet, for example, and certainly everything on my website is all referenced scientific citations and so on. So I want people to know, look, this might sound outrageous, especially if you look at mainstream views on health and fitness, but I'm not making this up. Here's the evidence. So that's what I wanted to do, was to show, look, this is not just my opinion. I'm showing that this is the case, whatever it is I happen to be talking about. And so, and I didn't also, from that point of view, I also realize that, I don't want to come across as arrogant or cocky. I just want to lay out the information there, hopefully helpful information. As far as what you had mentioned about, today's a new day, you step forward, the past doesn't matter. Yeah, I've thought about this with regard to myself, and I'm sure that I am no different from, virtually everybody else that way, and that you look back on your life, you have certain regrets. You think, I could have done this better, or I shouldn't have done this thing, I should have done something else. And, it especially becomes true for someone my age when you think, well, geez, I've lived a fairly long time now. And, you start to see, one doesn't know when the end is, obviously, but you start to see that, it's not all that far away compared to how long you've lived. So, when these things come up to me, thinking about regrets, I think, well, it's all, while regrets are a very natural thing, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. It's done. And so if you want to live your best life now, you've got to start now. You've got to start from today. So I think that I'm also probably, typical or average in the way that, I haven't had anything really terrible happen to me in my life. It's been, I got to say, it's been pretty decent. I've had, have well-paying jobs and, never went through anything really traumatic. Some people have, however, some people have it pretty rough. They've had psychologically traumatic events in their life that are tough to get over. And so it would be natural to really think about these things, ruminate on these kind of things a lot. But the same thing, you know, and so I don't want to make light of what anybody's gone through in life, but the same thing holds for them. There's just no point in ruminating on that stuff anymore. It can, I guess I would want to say, it can only do you harm to do that. And so if you want to get on with your life, then, you know, like the cliche saying is, today is the first day of the rest of your life. It is. So that's how I look at it. As far as, you know, what I put out on, you know, in my writing and on my Twitter feed and so on, I just hope people find it useful. I feel like, I mean, sometimes people say to me things like, you know, hey, you know, you can really change things. I'm so glad that you are getting this message out there, and, you know, let's try to overturn some of the, you know, nutritional and health dogma that is holding people back and so on. And, you know, while I'm flattered that, you know, people will say that to me, my attitude is, I know I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to overturn, you know, prevailing dogma. There are other people out there that are more talented and more ambitious and more hardworking at it than I am. You know, and hopefully they're making some headway. The way I feel about it is, I speak to those who want to hear it. And, you know, so yes, many people have told me that I've helped them, and I'm happy about that. You know, don't get me wrong, but I feel like, you know, it's out there. I'm just saying this. If you want to learn this, if you want to use this to your advantage, this information that I'm putting out there, there it is.
Well, I think it's important, especially for my audience. Like I said, many of us have allocated resources into investments that we believe within the next X amount of years are going to produce pretty substantial returns. And many folks are setting themselves up for financial security for the rest of their lives, and that's wonderful. However, when it comes to health and fitness, the truth is that although nutrition, anatomy, biology, all these things are a science, it's not a 100% complete science. We don't know everything. And that's the wonderful thing about it, is that there is an element of art now in the application of the things that we know, and a willingness to change as new information comes on the scene. Case in point, very clear, in the 70s, you know, all the hoopla about fat, help, and it was generalized. And you and I both know, with any amount of research, there are very, very healthy, beneficial fats, and of course, synthetic, disrupting fats that are going to not metabolize well in the system, and then they have downstream knock-on effects. Okay, but anyway, there was this, you know, campaign, fat's bad, and then pretty soon you're seeing everything in the store has a label on it, fat-free, but it might have 30 grams of sugar. Well, they didn't understand the body's reaction to sugar and insulin, and then and now we have a society that's teetering on insulin resistance, and we have diabetes levels like no other culture has ever had in the history of mankind. With all that being said, we don't need to go too far in the weeds to just understand good, healthy, whole foods that don't have stuff sprayed on them sustained cultures for thousands of years before we got into mixing agriculture with laboratories and figuring out all these wonderful little things to do. It's pretty, if you break it down like that, it can get simple, you know, and keep it simple, right? For me, keep it simple, stupid. So your site, I think, Obviously, we're going to put a link to it. It'll be in the description of this video. I want to encourage each and every one of you that are watching, go check it out. And obviously follow Dennis on Twitter, because I'll have the link in the description also. If I was to ask you, let's frame this in a way of what would be your best advice for children who aren't maybe yet completely indoctrinated into the quote unquote cultural norms around food.
Yeah, so that touches on a very central point. What you said, for one thing, what you said about the fat thing, the demonization of saturated fat. So that goes back a few decades, and into the 40s and 50s when they started talking about cholesterol and so on. And this is, to my mind, this is like the founding mistake of modern nutrition. And the reason I call it that is it's not just a mistake. It's not just any old mistake. The idea that they are all saying that saturated fat causes heart disease, right? So this is not just any old mistake, but it's the foundation for everything that's come along since. So as you point out, we now have an obesity and diabetes crisis going on that started, when they came out with the dietary guidelines, and that, then they, with the advent of these low-fat processed foods. So what is going on now? To make the point very clear, like you said, so that, say, a child who doesn't know the dogma, is that ultra processed foods are basically what's behind everything that we're seeing in the United States and increasingly across the rest of the world. So what are ultra processed foods? This is a sort of term of art that if you read the scientific nutritional literature, they use this for a good reason, and that's because basically all food is processed in some way or another, unless you're standing there and pick an apple off a tree and eat it. Then virtually everything you're eating is processed in some way or other. But ultra processed food takes it to a different level. So ultra processed foods are those foods that come in boxes and bags. They're sold in the middle aisles of the supermarket. They come with, bright labels and brand names, and they are typically made of, there are three main ingredients that you find in most of them, and that is refined grains, which in the context of the Western world, we're talking about white flour usually, sugar, and seed oils, aka vegetable oils. So those three put together are, if eaten in any substantial amount, are a health disaster. And the increasing advent of these ultra processed foods has happened since approximately 1980, when the dietary guidelines came out. Saturated fat and meat was demonized. So the main message would be, in my mind, to stay healthy is eat real whole foods. So real whole foods, we're talking about meat, eggs, fish, dairy, vegetables, some fruit, all these things. And that's what, that's what your meal should mainly be made of. And these are the kind of foods that keep you healthy. Now, we could certainly go into more detail on, which real whole foods or which combination or which macronutrients, all this kind of thing. But the basic message is that if you're eating ultra processed foods to any degree, you're harming your health. And Americans eat an enormous amount of these foods. some nutritional surveys find that around 60% of calories in the American diet come from these ultra processed foods. And of course, fast foods fall in the same category from fast food restaurants. So that's what I would tell, if somebody wanted my, what's your basic message in 2 minutes, that this is what I would say: eat real whole foods. And, we could talk about details, but you'll do fine if you do that.
Sure. One of the things, so I've been down here in Costa Rica for 2 years. Now, to sustain myself on a knowledge-based, healthy diet in the United States, and I was living in Northern California, in Sonoma County, specifically in the wine country, it's expensive. The middle of the store, those things that sit in bags and boxes and cans, per calorie are much cheaper than the perimeter of the store, the things that are in the refrigerators and things of that nature. When I moved down here to Costa Rica, it was very interesting for me to find that they're very localized. Everything is localized. So in my neighborhood, I have a butcher who happens, his backyard is where the pigs and the cows are, or on his property, and his butcher shop happens to be on the street, but it's on his property. Okay, and so he does everything right there. And the animals are just pasture raised. They're just raised on what's growing. The what we call the green grocers, these venduras, where you get your vegetables, many of them are getting inputs from many small farmers. And how it works is families that have a little property will grow stuff, keep what they need to keep for their family, and disperse the excess off to these little fruit and veg stands. Really wonderful stuff. And my little neighborhood stores have inputs coming in from small family type run entities, like the eggs and the cheese and the milks and these type of things that are coming in fresh. They're coming in 3 times a week from a little family that's got a place 500 yards away. And I can literally walk to every one of these spots here in my neighborhood. Converse, it was just a dream. And so the norm down here is organic, local food, and it's not been a campaign. There was no major movement to make this happen. It's just the way it's been for hundreds of years. Well, in the States, everything became industrialized. Everything became industrialized. Let's make all the Cheerios for the entire planet in this one spot. Well, anytime you have to move ingredients like that, you have to be able to stabilize them. Well, you're going to need help. Food's perishable. So how do we construct food so that it doesn't perish as quickly? It needs laboratory intervention. I don't know how else to put it. And it was so creating that model of the industry is what that whole thing was built on. And we're now seeing the consequences of it, but it's not being publicized that that's the consequence. You know what I mean? And so I'm really glad that there are people like you out there putting out information saying, hey, listen, there's a different way, there's a better way. And hopefully some people will get the message and, like you did for yourself, use this information to create a much better outcome.
Right. It's interesting what you were talking about there about the food. You can ask, Once you see what's going on, it explains a lot as to why our food system is how it is and why people are eating what they are eating. The food, like you were talking about in Costa Rica, the meat, the vegetables, and so on. There are a few characteristics about it. One is it spoils, and so it's very difficult to to fly it across the country, to stock it on a shelf because it spoils on a shelf, this kind of thing. Another thing is that it's also very difficult to standardize. So, meat, for example, it's in most cases very difficult to make it into standardized units that have a uniform weight and size. And that's one reason why when you buy meat in the supermarket, that the vast majority of the time it's just a supermarket brand. It doesn't have the brand of a big food company on it. It's because it's not profitable enough for them to get involved in it. And they can't do those things like standardized, like I said, standardized packaging, put it on a shelf, slap a colorful brand name on it. It just doesn't work. So the other, and as I'm sure anybody who follows the news over the years knows, I mean, from time to time, you read these things like, say, beef producers are basically losing money, farmers losing money, depending on what particular crop or what time of year or which year. But this sort of thing happens pretty frequently. The profit margins are generally pretty slim on these kind of things. Eggs go way up and way down in price depending on the year, and when they go up in price, more producers enter because it's a commodity, and then the price goes down, and then people leave the business because they can't make any money doing it. So this is not the case with the big food companies. So the big food companies, there are approximately 10 very large companies that control a whole lot of the world food supply, and certainly what is going on in the typical American supermarket. And the top three are Nestle, Coca-Cola, and Pepsi-Cola. And Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola are involved in a lot more different kinds of food than maybe most people realize. It's not just the soft drinks they're making. In any case, when you take these particular ingredients that I mentioned before, the refined grains, sugar, and seed oils, these are all very cheap ingredients. And when you put them together in certain ways and combine them and so on, and to make the foods that they sell, they're immensely profitable. So, like, for example, a couple of weeks ago, I was tweeting about this, a box of Cheerios. And it came down to the Cheerios cost, if you bought this in a large box, so it was the best price, and it was on Amazon, and so it was something like $4 a pound for Cheerios, and whereas you can get a pound of ground beef for $3 in my neck of the woods. So furthermore, not only do the Cheerios cost more, but the actual ingredients in those Cheerios is just, they're dirt cheap. We're talking about, in the case of Cheerios, we're talking about basically some flour and a few other flavorings and so on. Or in the case of, cornflakes is another one I like. I mean, big box of cornflakes. I mean, there's literally like 5 to 10 cents worth of corn in that box of cornflakes. And so this stuff is immensely profitable. Then when you get into things like, I don't know, frozen pizzas or, the kind of convenience foods that people eat, these are just very profitable. And this explains a lot about what you see. No company is going to go on television and advertise, here, go buy our pound of ground beef. It just does not happen, because there is, once you paid for the TV advertising, you're already at a loss. It just doesn't work that way. So this also explains a lot about a push for veganism, which we hear, if you keep up with this stuff, we hear so much about. Oh, it's good for the planet, it's good for your health. Look at this Game Changers movie and all these athletes. And I mean, there's constant propaganda going on for this. But when you realize that the foods that make up a vegan diet are far more profitable than eating, let's say, meat and potatoes, that explains a lot of it. This agitation, if you want to call it, for a vegan diet isn't coming. It's not a groundswell. It's coming from on high, from people who stand to make money from this. So this whole system of foods, of ultra processed foods versus real whole foods, the real whole foods are at a disadvantage because there's just not much money in them. It's local producers. I mean, even you mentioned your local producers in Costa Rica. It's much the same way really here in the United States. There's a little more sophistication. They get trucked maybe longer distances and larger scale of producers, but fundamentally it's the same, because producing meat, for example, is very much a small business activity for the most part, and it doesn't get taken a long ways away. It has to be refrigerated or it'll spoil. So there's all those disadvantages. So big food is at an overwhelming advantage here. And of course, people's tastes in the broader sense, they want something convenient. Yes. And in the particular sense, they want something tasty. These foods have been, these companies like Nestle or Coca-Cola, they employ food engineers and scientists whose job it is to make this food as tasty as hell.
Oh, absolutely.
Obviously their job is to get you to eat their food and to come back for more. And so that's what they're doing. And so they make it irresistible. There's also the idea that some of these combinations of foods, even in their natural state, to the extent that they occur in nature, are quite irresistible. The combination of carbs and fat. If it's sugar and fat, it's dessert. If it's carbs and fat, you've got a pizza or something like that. They're pretty irresistible. They don't occur much in nature, but so with big food out of the picture, if you think back 150 years ago, when grandma made a pie, that was pretty irresistible. It doesn't necessarily require big food. It's a combination of the fat and flour and sugar, and it's just like, oh my God, give me another piece of that, please.
Absolutely. But here's the thing: 150 years ago, when grandma made the pie, there at least was a tremendous amount of choice. Sure. In that food producers had a much higher number of them in smaller volume entities servicing more localized areas. And just like, I honestly believe this because I was one of these people. For many, many years, I walked through my life in Northern California oblivious to thinking about those things, partially because I was young and bulletproof. You know what I mean? I could do anything. God gave me many gifts. So it wasn't anything I thought about. But now as I'm getting older and I'm seeing the effects of prolong engagement in being oblivious to things. I'm getting to see how my 74-year-old pop, who I've got in the apartment next to me, his life is pretty much relegated to watching the television. He doesn't want to go out and walk with me. He doesn't, going to Walmart, getting out of the taxi and walking around in Walmart wears him out. Well, there's this whole thing about it. It's a holistic thing. Health is a holistic thing. So nutrition is a big part of it. Water is a part of it. Sleep is a part of it. Understanding the bioelectrical element of who you are. So if you're only exposed to the positive charge of the atmosphere, but never the negative charge of the earth, and you're not getting grounded and getting that neutralization, well, everything that's in our body, every cell has a positive charge and negative charge. I mean, everything works together. And then there's also the movement element. Like, I'm a big fan of Tai Chi, although I'm not good at it. I'm not even good enough to call it Tai. I guess I'm getting good at Qigong, and I want to become good at Tai Chi. And so that's kind of where I'm at. But there's all these things work together. And I would say most people walk through their lives oblivious to these things. They're putting chemicals on their skin, which absorbs into our system. We're eating who knows what. Who knows what's in half the food you're eating? You don't know. And you take a look at numbers, and you look at the USA, and you say, okay, this is the culture that's the most distorted from education around what really is nutrition, real nutrition, not the propaganda stuff that's paid for by General Mills or PepsiCo or any of those outfits. And you go, okay. And you look at health and fitness, and health and fitness is all around equipment. At least the advertising or the exposure people get. Use this machine, do this, versus roll your neck 20 times to the left and 20 times to the right. Roll your shoulders back and forth 30 times to front, and then 30 times to the back. Do the hip, the little things like that. You don't need all that stuff to get health. So health is always, in my view, been the lens in which things are being sold to me. And the same with nutrition. You want to be healthy, buy this $50 bottle of supplements. You want to be healthy, buy this 25-pound bag of cacao. You want to be healthy, buy this blank, 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 fill in the blank. I don't know. I got very disillusioned with all that. And it's really easy to see when you get out of the United States and you go to, we'll say, depressed areas of the world. People grow food, they eat food, they're much more physically inclined. They don't drive a car somewhere, they walk. You know what I mean? And it's this whole, I've equated wealthy countries per capita are the most unhealthy countries. The poorer countries are much healthier. Well, why is that? Rich people eat processed shit. Poor people grow the food they eat.
It has a lot to do with it. Certainly for much of my life, I never gave much of that a second thought as far as what I was eating, or maybe I would say that I was concerned about my health, but I didn't think I was doing anything wrong in that regard. And I assume many people feel the same way. There is a large contingent of people that really don't care a lot, that's for sure. But there's also another large contingent that do care and think they're doing the right things, but are not. And so then they develop chronic health problems, and if they do develop one and go see the doctor, the result is going to be drugs or surgery in 99% of cases. Not better nutrition or anything like that. Doctors, unfortunately, have been so indoctrinated into the saturated fat is bad dogma that they won't tell people what they can't truly tell people what is good for them, even assuming that they see that as part of the job, which most of them don't. I mean, they feel, rightly or wrongly, hey, it's my job to practice medicine, and that involves administering drugs or surgery or other treatments, not to tell my patients what to eat. And so even with the best will in the world, it's hard for somebody, to go into our healthcare system and get to the roots of their problems. What is offered in many or most cases is a Band-Aid for their problems. For example, diabetes, which is one of the most serious illnesses precisely because it leads to much higher risk of all the others, for example,
Right.
heart disease and cancer. So, you definitely don't want to become diabetic. And so what happens when somebody becomes diabetic? Well, I see all the time, dietitians on Twitter or on the internet, they're recommending that their diabetic patients eat a high carb diet, and which, turns into glucose in their bloodstream, and then they need insulin to control it. It's really borderline criminal, if you ask me. Not too many
Making a
people are
lot of
asking,
people.
but that's my view. And that's what the dietitians involved with them. I mean, if somebody develops symptoms of diabetes and goes to their doctor and they say, "Doctor, does my diet have anything to do with it?" He'll, very likely say, "Well, just, talk. I'll make you an appointment with the dietitian," and then the dietitian tells the patient these things. And meanwhile, the doctor will say, "Well, here, take these pills or inject this insulin. And then we'll put you on some other drugs, statins, for example, so you don't get heart disease, allegedly." It's pretty bad. This is what I think is the typical experience of people as their health declines. And it doesn't have to be that way. There are. Let me tell you another telling example here. So there are a couple of doctors that I follow on Twitter, who are advocates of low carbohydrate diets. So low carbohydrate diets are totally against mainstream health dogma right now. So these doctors, one of them is Timothy Noakes and the other is Gary Fettke, the former in South Africa and the latter in Australia. They've both been brought up by their respective medical societies and threatened to have their licenses taken away because they told their patients to eat a low carbohydrate diet. The Tim Noakes trial was pretty high profile because he was brought up by, I don't know, like the main health agency in South Africa or something like that, and in a trial that lasted, I think, a couple of years. And he was eventually acquitted, but you had this big low carb debate going on in a courtroom all those years. That part is less important than the fact that he was brought up and threatened to have his license yanked for advocating a low carbohydrate diet. Gary Fettke is a surgeon in Australia, an orthopedic surgeon, I believe. And patients would come to him and he would advise them to eat low carbohydrate diets. And, the medical board that oversaw him said, "Hey, you're a surgeon. You can't tell people what to eat. That's outside your scope of practice. And if you keep doing that, you're not going to have a license to practice medicine. So this is how the health establishment, these are just two examples of how the health establishment deals with, these mavericks who are really trying to help people in the most fundamental way. This, high carbohydrate nutritional dogma is at the center of the health establishment's nutrition guidelines. And you have to ask yourself, why would they have this reaction to doctors advocating low carbohydrate eating? The answer is it threatens everything about them. They've been telling us to eat this way for the last several decades, and they can't very well just turn around now and say, whoops, we made a mistake, and now everybody's fat and diabetic. And oh, sorry, they can't do that. Not only would the repercussions would presumably be severe, but they would lose any trace of credibility they had. And we're talking about, mainstream, academic nutritionists, academic doctors who are teaching from on high at, Harvard and Yale and Stanford and many other places. They have promulgated this dogma, and it's totally wrong. And they react with fury when somebody, especially, they don't react with fury at me, because who am I? I'm nobody. I don't have an MD after my name. But when somebody who is professionally qualified says, hey, this is wrong, they do not like that one bit. So this sort of careerism that these people are all involved in it. This idea that you should that low carbohydrate, real whole foods cures a whole lot of problems. They don't like that because they're embedded in this group, this academia and industry and so on that has been advocating this for years. Then you have the influence of the big food companies, which make generous donations to some of these places. There's the famous incident that was publicized in recent years, where in the 1960s, a sugar industry group gave a bunch of money to this nutritionist at Harvard to exonerate sugar from causing illness and to point the finger at saturated fat. Yep. And then you have the pharmaceutical companies. So at the highest levels in academic medicine, you have some obviously very talented, very intelligent doctors and scientists who have worked very hard to get where they are, and they get money from pharmaceutical companies. It's no secret. You can read almost any paper in, let's say, the New England Journal of Medicine, and you scroll to the bottom and read about financial conflicts of interest, because these days they are required, or at least they are supposed to, disclose any ties. And these guys are getting money from drug companies. They'll get money, it's not like literally
chronic illness is big business. Yes. I'm looking down at the clock, and it's time to wrap up. I try to keep these at an hour or under. Okay. I'm gonna set the table for you to put out your final thoughts, but I'll tell anybody that's watching this right now, depending upon where you're at and your level of understanding, if you're new to the idea and you want to get a taste more, obviously go see the website. Go check out some things. Like, there's some wonderful documentaries. One that I thought was really insightful was called Food Matters. I think it was produced maybe 10 years ago. Wonderful documentary. There are incredible there's incredible information to nutritional ketosis and the benefits of fat and protein and organic carbohydrates in the form of vegetables and things of that nature. There's also something to be said about vegetarianism. No, there's no one size fits all for everything. However, the closer you can get to what you put in your mouth came out of the ground or was raised over here without any artificial stuff added to it, the better off you're going to be. Dennis, you want to your final thoughts and take us home?
Yeah, it's true. Eating real whole foods is a big deal in terms of chronic disease. For most people, diet is going to be a huge lever for getting their health in order, their weight in order. This is another. I could just touch on this for a second. Another widely spread fallacy is that exercise is going to help you lose weight, and there's really very little evidence that it does, for a number of reasons, but basically because it's trivially easy to eat more than you burn off in exercise, and exercise also makes you hungry. But this is widely spread about that. And food companies love this idea too. It's not our products that are making you fat. It's because you're too lazy. So that lets them off the hook. So eating real whole foods, that would be the first place. Anybody who's having health problems, that would be where I would start.
Yeah, right on. Well, thank you for taking the time with me, folks. Remember, you'll be able to catch Dennis through his links below. And until next time, Pura Vida.